Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and today it's my number 20 team in my 2024 NFL Deep Dive series. It's the Atlanta Falcons. Make sure to hit the like and leave a comment in the comment section below, help out with the algorithms. And this is the first playoff team that we're covering. I know they're the 20th ranked team. This is a team that I will refer to in certain aspects as being bipolar-ish, I guess would be the term for it. Definitely at this point, in terms of overall talent level of individual players and position groups, the best team by far. In terms of an overall talent roster, they might be top 10 in the entire league. Now, they are a team in transition. They just brought in a new head coach, Raheem Morris, who's really going to have to prove himself as being a top 20 head coach in the league. And I think that if he can get to that level, that'll drastically affect the ranking of this team come next season. I still think they are about a year away, and I'll be addressing that for a number of position groups. They did bring in Kirk Cousins to be their new quarterback, but then simultaneously used a number 8 overall pick to get Michael Penix Jr., which made no sense to a lot of people, including myself, taking the oldest quarterback in the draft in a situation where he's going to have to sit 2 more years. Very controversial. I don't understand it. I don't think the justification for it was any better. I think it drastically affected the ranking of the offense. Because you had Kirk Cousins, you could have had Rome Odunze, you could have traded back and gotten Brian Thomas Jr., Adonai Mitchell. Like, there's so many possibilities that you had here to move back. Or, you could have taken the top edge rusher. You could have taken the top cornerback and drastically improved those rooms. Though I do like the drafting of Braylon Trice. I like Brandon Dorless and Ruka Horo. I think that was a really good new influx to that front four that is in drastic need of talent and in need of development. Arnold Ebiketie did take a step forward from his rookie year last year, and he's going to need that guidance from Raheem Morris, who admittedly, at least from his run with the Rams, Kobe Turner played great under him last year. But other than that, that's a group that's really been lacking in development. They've been searching for that edge rusher forever. They traded for Von Miller to make sure that they even had one. But when Raheem Morris was there wasn't a lot of development from the edge room in general. Now, did the Rams have all the assets to throw at it? Not necessarily, and I think that's why we sort of saw Atlanta throw so many assets at that front four. And they still have some pretty good talent there. Grady Jarrett's probably on the down end. David Onyemata, great early down defensive lineman, very serviceable also on third down in passing situations. They got the best safety in the league, Jesse Bates. AJ Terrell is a middle to high end cornerback one. It'll be interesting to see what AJ Terrell would look like with an edge rush, with a pass rush that can allow him to play much more instinctual, to allow him to play more aggressively, where he's not constantly having to chase guys around because the opposing quarterback has all the time in the world, making his job so much more difficult. So how Raheem Morris builds this defense in particular is the big question mark, because there's so much talent in every position group on the offense that it's almost impossible for the offense to fail. But the theme throughout all this is going to be this coaching staff. So let's start with one of the lower ranked coaching staffs that I have. The brand new head coach of the Atlanta Falcons is Raheem Morris, who's on his second stint now as a head coach. He had that run in Baltimore when he succeeded John Gruden. After John Gruden had a really great run as the Bucs head coach, winning Super Bowls, division titles, and everything. And he kind of inherited a weird situation there, but he never really got comfortable. He was very young back then as well. I think people forget how long ago it was that Raheem Morris was the head coach. They were sort of trying to stay on the same line of keeping youth in the coach's room, and it kind of backfired there. Sometimes it doesn't always work, but I think now you get a guy who's got a lot more experience. It is hard to judge him, though, because all you really have is based upon his previous head coaching experience, which he was not a great head coach in his run with Tampa Bay. And he really just recently settled in as a top half of the league defensive coordinator. So I think it was just adding the experience in there. Now, it could have been just a situation like what he had with the Rams, for example, where, they were really a two-man defense for a long time. It was Aaron Donald, it was Jalen Ramsey, and that was it. And then everyone else sort of fit in as role players, but nobody was a real superstar outside of that. And he's coming into a team that I think has very eerily similar traits to them. He's got Jesse Bates, he's got David Onyemata. Grady Jarrett is sort of just up and down, maybe on the back end here of his career, on the down slope, regressing. His real challenge is going to be to do things that he wasn't really known for, at least in his last stint with the Rams, which is truly developing like lower end players, raw talents into these top level players. Kobe Turner last year, obviously came on really huge. I thought he was incredibly underrated. So it'll be interesting to see how he handles this new environment. I still think this defense is like a year away, just because they're coming in and changing the system around from what they had previously. So that takes time, and especially when you'll see when we get into the player evaluations, they are a very hot and cold defense in terms of how their position groups are going to grade out against the run and against the pass. So that's going to be his real challenge. And he brought Jimmy Lake along with him to be a defensive coordinator. He's my 29th defensive coordinator. Again, just he was the University of Washington's head coach for a while before coming to the NFL. Defensive coordinators coach, defensive backs coach. For the Rams, he was, what position coach was he? I believe he was just one of the assistant coaches or something. He was the assistant head coach for the Rams, just last year. So that's a guy who's coming in with some experience. We saw that with the previous video that we did, where that can be very advantageous to have a guy who has that type of experience come in. I think that's going to help Raheem Morris, and somebody he's comfortable with from his time with the Rams. Typical new head coach stuff, bringing in old members of the staff he was on the previous team, giving them some sort of promotion to come over. And you take a look at some of these position coaches on the defense, looking for names that sort of pop out immediately. There isn't really one that pops out that makes me go, oh yeah, this is a guy who's going to make a huge difference. Barrett Rudd is a name that you recognize because he was a player quite recently. He's the inside linebackers coach. But really, really nothing that stands out. So it's hard to truly assess what this defensive staff in particular is going to look like. With the offensive staff, Zach Robinson comes in. He's the new offensive coordinator. I grade him out at 18th. He was part of the Rams. He was a Rams quarterback coach, the passing game coordinator. So I really like what he did over there. So him getting this promotion, I think, makes a lot of sense. How he handles the quarterback situation in particular here is going to be interesting to see. Kirk Cousins gets a big contract. They use the number 8 overall pick on Michael Penix. Is Kirk Cousins going to be healthy all year? How do you design an offense that Kirk Cousins can run if he isn't 100%? You got to rely a lot on the offensive line to keep him from not having to run around all that much. Those Achilles injuries are killers. And can he develop the wide receiver room here that's really just kind of top heavy? Puka Nacua had a great year coming in, filling in a lot, picking up a lot of the slack for Cooper Kupp when Cooper Kupp was out. And then he did find a way as a passing game coordinator to keep him involved once Cooper Kupp was playing in 100%. So that's going to be a challenge for him. And the challenge for him is going to be really to find a number 2 receiver to Drake London. Kyle Pitts is a tight end, sort of hybrid player. So maybe this is the year that Kyle Pitts finally breaks out. But does he break out as more of a outside threat? I think that's going to be something for him to watch in particular. And kind of like the defensive position coaches, I'm looking at some of these offensive position coaches. Ike Hilliard stands out as a wide receivers coach, Giants legend there. But, really not anything that makes you super, I would say, enthusiastic about a particular position group. TJ Yates, a very, another young position coach here, just was playing for Houston not that long ago. He's the quarterbacks coach. So it's going to be a staff that's going to have to grow together. And I think that's going to come with a lot of growing pains. And I think that's really why they are the weak link of this team. Because as we're going to get into the positions, you're going to see they got a lot of high-end talent here. They grade out really well compared to the rest of the league. It's just, it's just a matter of what this coaching staff can put together. And I think just what they're inheriting alone makes them the favorites to win this division. I think that's absolutely, especially with how weak the rest of the division is. But there's going to be some growing pains here. And I think that when you have the talent, particularly some of the weaknesses that we're going to see on the defensive side of the ball in particular, that's going to be up to the head coach and how he takes that step back into being the head coach, being that more of a CEO role, and taking a step back. The defense does naturally get less attention from him. That's why there is a huge difference between being a great coordinator and a great head coach. So Raheem Morris, he's the one to really watch here. If they win the division, he will be in Coach of the Year conversations, I would think. But how serious those conversations become, I think, is based more on, they got to get to 11 or 12 wins. And I don't know that implementing the new system across the board here is going to result in that. And but man, not short on talent. So let's get into the positional grades here, and we'll start with the quarterback, and they are tied for 12th here with Kirk Cousins, who gets an 88 grade. I would maybe grade him a little bit higher, but this is sort of what Kirk Cousins is. Kirk Cousins is that guy who some weeks he'll play like the 15th best quarterback in the league, and other times he'll look like he's a top 5 quarterback. So settling somewhere in between there, I think, is where the consistency is going to be for him in terms of his production. The injury's a concern. Not everyone can just come back from a major injury. So, especially at his age, and he's had injuries in the past. You hope that it's sort of just all good. I mean, he's coming in, the Rams offensive system's coming in, which he sort of did just run with Kevin O'Connell, who came over from the Rams as well. So I think there's going to be a lot of familiarity there. It's mostly getting everybody else up to speed, I would think. But the drafting of Michael Penix was sort of that was a weird move. Just because they could have gotten, you could have gotten Rome Odunze in here and gotten him another weapon. That seemed like an obvious thing if you weren't going to go with a defensive player. So how much faith do they have in Kirk Cousins' health? Not only in the short term, but in the long term throughout his whole contract. He's going to make a lot of money. and I think he's going to produce at a higher level. I think he is the difference for this team in terms of making the playoffs more so than any of these new coaches on the coaching staff are. I think he's the one that takes them up that extra level. I think he accounts for at least 2 extra wins as opposed to last year. Because a lot of teams did get better this year. But how he settles in, you've seen Kirk Cousins have very fast starts to seasons and then sort of die off after the first half of the year. So that's going to be something to watch. How much of that is the coaching staffs? How much is that Kirk Cousins? Because that seems to be something that was unique to Kirk Cousins, not necessarily any of the coaching staffs he's had, because he's had multiple head coaches, multiple offensive systems, and it's sort of been the same story every single time. Is Taylor Heinicke going to be your quarterback too early in the year because of Michael Penix being a rookie, and how much do you want to rush him out there? He is a much older rookie. He had like 5-6 years in college. He's a left-handed quarterback. I know that might not seem like a big deal here, but you have to keep in mind they're going to be building this offense for Kirk Cousins, who's a right-handed quarterback. So to put Michael Penix in, he's going to be having to operate everything in that way unless they have packages that would account for a left-handed quarterback. Now, what's the difference? The way that the quarterback's body naturally stands when they're a left-handed quarterback and a right-handed quarterback is significant. It changes how that initial first read can be after the ball snapped. Imagine you turn your right shoulder forward compared to turning your left shoulder forward. The position of your head and the natural position of your eyes are in a completely different spot. So how they would navigate that, it does make me wonder if Michael Penix just isn't quarterback 3 throughout the year, and then they just throw in Taylor Heinicke if Kirk Cousins struggles with his health or any number of factors in which they might need to have somebody else under center other than Kirk Cousins for any point in time during the season. Now, I look at this the same way I sort of look at their division rivals, the New Orleans Saints, in the sense of if for some reason this all goes wrong, I think there's a world where the last 2 or 3 games, Michael Penix would be the quarterback, and they would have, a version of the offense that would account for the change from right-handed to left-handed. But that's also, I think they're not very likely to be in that situation unless a lot of things go wrong, particularly if their entire roster just turns into an emergency room. Then that obviously would be a problem. But again, these are just hypotheticals throwing out there for this quarterback room. But I think just talent and overall throughout the year, I think when it averages out, you're going to have a top 12 quarterback in the NFL, which is good enough considering the talent we're about to cover here in terms of the offense. So he's playing behind the 5th best running back room in the entire league. It's Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. 2 very different skill sets. Bijan is this, I think he's very much an all-purpose back. I think he did show a lot of that last year in his rookie year. Just an amazing talent. How he performs in his second year, we've seen rookie running backs who are drafted highly come in, have great rookie years. And then, that sophomore slump really hits the rookie running backs, hits the running back classes really more than any other position group, it seems, in the NFL. They seem to be the ones that get off to the fastest starts and then see the most noticeable regression in year 2. But they usually don't have great complements like Tyler Algier, who's going to be able to come in and be doing a lot of the grunt work. Tyler Algier is a starter in the league on so many of these NFL teams, and he's found himself in this situation just because of the way Arthur Smith wanted to operate his team building strategy. But I think this does, in the long term, it creates a benefit for what they have. Kirk Cousins is not a particularly athletic quarterback. He's coming off of that injury, like we said. having a strong running back room is going to make things a lot easier for him. It's going to slow up pass rushes, give him more time in the pocket running those play actions that Shanahan, McVay style system loves to run. And also when you have Michael Penix back there, essentially in a year or two, probably 2 years, Tyler Algier will be, I think, on the last year of his deal. So you're still going to have this two-man combination that's really going to help him develop as well and keep him comfortable. And having Bijan Robinson also be one of the better receiving backs in the entire league. He's my number 2 receiving back. Just an absolute monster of a weapon. And this is where he's really going to shine throughout games, is because this threat is always going to be there. He can run routes. He can make people miss. He's really good at navigating and sitting in those hook zones and the flat zones and all that. Identifying on those running back option routes. He's always seemingly making the perfect decision. And that's also going to be something that's really going to help Kirk Cousins, because they don't really have that high-end wide receiver talent, as we'll get to eventually. So having the safety blanket there is going to be an absolute... I feel like Bijan, this is where this year in particular, he's really going to shine, is in the receiving game. I think that Tyler Algier will get... I think he gets a lot of the first down work. And then how that first down goes determines who's the running back on second and third down. I think if you find yourself in a lot of second and short situations, second and medium situations, that's going to be Tyler Algier time. So I think situationally throughout games, even though you have a lot of talent here, particularly in Bijan Robinson, to not beat him into the ground, I think we're really only ever going to see him on third downs and like second and long situations. I think anything, those first downs and then second and medium, second and short situations, that's going to be Tyler Algier's wheelhouse all year long. And so I think they could be in situations where in games, Bijan Robinson might only have 15 touches and Tyler Algier could be, high 20s. And then I think there could be situations where it's vice versa. I think that's a very, very underrated asset to have on this offense. That's really going to help out everybody. Jace McClellan is a rookie. He's sort of going to be that backup early down third. He's the quintessential third string early down back. Tyler Algier is still your second best receiving back. He's, again, better than some of the best that teams have. It's going to be interesting to see what happens as his contract expires, what this offense really looks like by the end of the season. I think teams might be on the phone calling about Tyler Algier, and I think it's going to be very tempting for Atlanta to get rid of him, pick up maybe like a day 2 pick, like a third round pick, or what could end up being an early 4th round pick. I look at teams like the Giants, who could be looking for a young running back who can come in and be that workhorse back, and Tyler Algier could definitely be that. But just to be overshadowed by a top level talent like Bijan Robinson, that really raises the entire room up to just being exactly what Arthur Smith previously had wanted to have, which is a top 5 running back room. And I think when you combine what they bring here, 5th best in terms of pure rushing threats, 2nd best in receiving back, they're probably the number 1 running back room in the league once you average all that out. I think San Francisco's the only other one that really comes close in that sense. Now, this is where the weakness of this offense really lives, is in the wide receiver room. Drake London is going to get his first real opportunity to be a number 1 receiver in the league. And I think that we're going to see a real breakout from him this year. Obviously, it's hard to project that, but I think at worst, this is where he's going to end up, an 82 grade. Who comes in and breaks out as this number 2 wide receiver? at the end, that's the real question here, because overall it's the 27th best room, because you got sort of Drake London, who's like this middle to low end number one. Then you got Kadero Hodges and Darnell Mooney, who, if you told me that was your wide receiver 3, I'd be like, okay, that's pretty damn good. But having Kadero Hodges be your number 2 receiver, that's a tough situation to be in. And when you get to some of the depth here, they traded Desmond Ridder for Rondale Moore, who never really has come on for the Arizona Cardinals. Now he's in a situation where you hope there's a lot more stability in terms of the offense, that his role will be more directly carved out. They don't really have another talent on the team like him. You know, Darnell Mooney and Drake London are both are definitely not the same player that Rondale Moore is. He's really going to be competing for snaps with Kadero Hodges. So how much of Kadero Hodges' production over the last season in particular, and the way that he graded out and performed, how much of that was just Arthur Smith being in love with wide receiver 5 types? That was sort of like the running joke was, you know, you got Drake London, you got Kyle Pitts, and then you see Arthur Smith. He's like, but do you see this wide receiver 6 over here? We gotta get him on the field. How much of that was what was going on? I think is going to be really determined here with this new offense. Excuse me. Ray McLeod, I think, makes the team with his special teams ability. So I think Austin Mack and Casey Washington are going to be the ones competing for a roster spot here. But even when you get to the tight ends, they have the 9th best tight end by my estimation. I'm doing that as a projection for what I think Kyle Pitts can be now that he's got an offensive system that will actually work for him. And I think that they'll see that he was so misused by Arthur Smith, and that they're going to have game plans specifically to get him in that Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Mark Andrews level of production, where he's going to get double-digit targets every week, every single week, and that's going to be tracked throughout a game. Like, hey, we've only targeted Kyle Pitts 3 times. You know, we got to get some plays called here that can get the ball in his hands, you know. And because he's such a great athlete and he's such this like hybrid almost, you can do a lot of the same things that you're going to draw for Drake London for Kyle Pitts as well. And I think that that's going to create a lot of mismatches that hopefully this offensive staff is going to be capable of exploiting throughout the year, because him becoming your wide receiver 2 to Drake London, or even your wide receiver 1 to Drake London, I think that could result in a really productive offense, because, you know, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, if those are your 3 most targeted players in the passing game, you should have a very good passing game. You got one of the best receiving backs in the league. You got a top 10 tight end, and then you got like a top 25-ish wide receiver who, if Bijan gets like 80 catches, Kyle Pitts gets another 80 something catches, Drake London can be in that 80 catch range as well. And I think that you could end up being a top 10 passing offense. And Kirk Cousins is very good at using his top talent as well. You know, he used Justin Jefferson to great effect. He used Jordan Addison last year to great effect. You know, you name it, he's done a great job. He's not somebody who, when he has a true number 1 receiver, he has a top level talent like TJ Hawkinson, even, for example, at tight end, he's not the quarterback who's all of a sudden just not going to use these guys. So that's something that I think goes in the plus column, even though this wide receiver room is still very much in development. This is why, another reason, if you don't take Michael Penix and you take Rome Odunze instead, you've significantly, drastically improved this wide receiver room and this weapons room overall. So that's another thing that sort of throws everything into, why would you do that? Because then you would have London, Adunze, and Mooney as your 3 wide receivers out there with Kyle Pitts. And that is probably a top 10 weapons room in the entire league starting in. But now you've sort of screwed yourself in that sense, because now you're asking Darnell Mooney basically to be your number 2 outside receiver, which is not a bad role for him to have. But when you surround it with Hodges and Rondell Moore and Austin Mack, it's like you're not really setting that wide receiver room up for a high level success. You're sort of laying Drake London out to dry there, where he's going to be just living on double teams, which is going to be difficult for him to get through because he's not necessarily used to early in his early NFL career to having to deal a lot with that, though he has played very, very well and has in a lot of games throughout his early career, his young career, and he has shown the flashes of that wide receiver one, justifying his draft spot. You don't want to continuously put him in positions where he's not going to be able to, be comfortable out on the field. When you get at this young type of wide receiver, and he wasn't this, Drake London wasn't this, megastar type like a Marvin Harrison Jr. is coming in. There was still a lot of work for Drake London to do. He was somebody drafted for upside more so than what they thought he could bring them in his first and second year. And I think I don't want to say he exceeded expectations. He was the 8th overall pick in the draft. I think he met the expectations perfectly that you would expect from a high upside early wide receiver one taken in a draft in the top 10. How he continues to develop now with Kirk Cousins, I just wish they put him in a situation where defenses wouldn't be able to focus so much on him on the back end. I think that would have created so much. It would have been just so much of a better situation for him coming in. I think now this wide receiver room, because of that decision to take Michael Penix over Rome Odunze, has set this group back a year and has, I think, slowed the development projection for Drake London just a little bit. One thing that they do have that's very good is a great offensive line. And we'll start with the pass blocking. They're tied for 12th in the league, just like their quarterback. Their tackles, Jake Matthews, Caleb McGarry, one of the best tackle combinations in the entire league. Great compliments to one another. Jake Matthews is that left tackle, great pass blocker. Caleb McGarry, serviceable pass blocker, really shines in the run blocking. Probably the best guard in the entire league, and Chris Lidstrom there on the right side. Great pass blocker, great run blocker. He is the best player on this offensive line for sure. Drew Dahlman has really stepped up as a great center. Very serviceable in pass blocking, but kind of like Caleb McGarry, shines in the run blocking game, which really raises that entire group up. The only question mark is Matthew Bergeron. Draft pick from last year, was a tackle at Syracuse or Illinois. I always get those teams confused. Converted to guard. Struggled for sure. That's you switch positions and had to come in, be a starter, but he's surrounded by so many good players that I would expect a great jump up. And if he's your worst offensive lineman, I think you're in a great spot. The depth, other than Tyler Vrabel and Kyle Hinton, nothing really there. Tyler Vrabel, I think, could be a swing tackle, third tackle, and then Kyle Hinton, sort of like your fourth interior offensive lineman. But you hope you never get to that. They have, Andrew Stoiber and Barry Wesley, who are kind of tackle / guards, but not the worst depth for an offensive line that we've seen in the league, but definitely top heavy because of how talented they are, especially when you get to the run blocking. They're the third best run blocking group in the league, particularly the right side of the line. Jake Matthews, again, not a great run blocker. Matthew Bergeron, better at run blocking than he was pass blocking, but still very much in development. But Dahlman, probably one of the best, if not the best run blocking center in the league. Chris Lidstrom, top 5 at that. Caleb McGarry, top 7 run blocking tackle. This is where they're really going to live. You're going to be able to pull these guys. You're going to be able to run some stretches. And it can't be stressed enough, the type of system that they're coming in and playing with, that lots of play action. So it really is going to help them out as well with that type of system and that type of threat with those running backs back there. And having a real quarterback now where teams are going to have to respect the pass a lot. So it's going to slow up a lot of these rushes and allow them to really be able to perform at higher levels. And probably I'd say in the pass blocking sense, maybe outplay this 12th ranking and get them into the top 10. But, I don't know if they get much better than third in the league. I mean, how much more could you expect from them? I think it's a pretty damn good rating. Same story in terms of the depth, not the worst depth, but, Storm Norton, is a good run blocker compared to his pass blocking. Vrabel, again, sort of just stays as that number 3 tackle. Obviously you don't want to lose anyone. I think if they do lose someone, it does drastically change it, because you see how these guys are grading out and how losing 20 points could drastically affect our ranking of the offensive line. But I still think they have enough talent here where as long as they don't lose all these starters, they're going to be living as a top 10 offensive line for the entire season, which is only going to benefit the high level of weaponry and quarterback play that they're going to have coming in. So this is a great thing for this offensive staff in particular to be inheriting. It's going to be very hard to screw up. I'll say that. Very difficult. Just running through a positional summary here. And again, just so much high-end talent. And we talk about the wide receiver tight end blocking. They got a B grade in that. I think on these early downs, Kyle Pitts won't necessarily have to be a true tight end, even though he's not a terrible blocker. You got Charlie Werner in there who's going to come in and be a blocking tight end for you. You got some fullback play in there as well. That's sort of going to be under the radar. So I really like it. They don't have a lot of depth in that sense. But I think when you look at the depth grades in particular, this is some of the best depth that we've seen so far as well. For the depth to be all over a 60 grade, 3 positions in the passing game that are 88s, running backs in the 90s, offensive line play that is just fantastic. This is going to be a good group. So overall, they are the 4th ranked offense in the league right now with an 81.24 grade, the 4th best passing offense, and the 5th best rush offense. Just unbelievable talent to come in. Now, like I said, the weakness is in the coaching staff. How much will the coaching staff drag down this talent is the thing to watch for this team throughout the year. Moving on to the defensive side of the ball, we'll start with the edge room, and this is the real weakness of the team, is this edge group. It's been the weakness of the Atlanta Falcons for years now. They've thrown so many assets at this group over the years with so many different regimes. And really since John Abraham, I can't think of a high-end edge rusher that's been on this team in a long time. They drafted Braylon Trice, who I actually really like. He comes in and he's automatically the best edge rusher against the pass for you. Arnold Ebiketie, progressed last year after a really poor rookie season. Maybe now being put in a position where there's at least more depth around him, he's going to be able to take that extra step forward again. And by extra depth, I mean Braylon Trice, because Lorenzo Carter is there. He's going to move to the bench, you would hope. And then there's just a whole lot of nothing going on for the rest of this group in terms of their ability to get after the quarterback. Even when you move on to the edge against the run, they are tied for 23rd. Arnold Ebiketie does come off the field for me in this situation. This is where Lorenzo Carter comes in on early downs, because he does have that off-ball linebacker hybrid ability that I think is going to be a very good skill set to have for them throughout games. Braylon Trice and Arnold Ebiketie are going to be the ones competing for that extra work, though I think Braylon Trice is significantly better than Arnold Ebiketie in that sense. So I do feel like the rotation should probably be between Lorenzo Carter and Arnold Ebiketie, depending on down and distance, and then Braylon Trice just comes in and he runs as your edge one player throughout the season, sort of sink or swim. They're complemented by, in my estimation, a good interior group. We'll start with the interior rush, tied for 15th. Grady Jarrett, David Onyemata, those are your two guys. They did draft Brandon Dorlus and Rook Ohorohoro, so that makes me think that maybe Grady Jarrett might be on his last year here, because Rook Ohorohoro pretty much got drafted to be, I think, the backup to David Onyemata, while Brandon Dorlus has like this 3-4 defensive end type of ability, where I think he's going to come in and be that early down defensive end probably, and then kick inside and eventually take over the Grady Jarrett role on those passing situations as an interior rusher. It was just interesting to watch him throw that many assets at that group. And then when you move to the interior defensive line's ability against the run, they're third in the league. LaCale London is someone who I think will get some early down work. Zach Harrison, him and Brandon Dorlus sort of play the same position. I think them drafting Brandon Dorlus, this new regime drafting him, makes it so maybe Zach Harrison is the odd man out here for this, because now he's sort of gone to like a third string situation. I think long term, I think as Brandon Dorlus works his way into the league, you'll see him take more of those snaps away from Zach Harrison. And then Rook Ohorohoro, is coming in as a much better run defender than a pass rusher. So we'll see how he develops in that sense throughout the year, and how that moves Grady Jarrett off the field on these early down situations as the year progresses. And then how David Onyemata maybe comes off the field in third down situations for someone like Brandon Dorlus. Like, this is how they work Dorlus in to the defensive line rotation. How about building this depth? Still lacking in certain areas, certain high-end stuff, especially with Grady Jarrett, who's probably, like I said, maybe on the down end of his career, not going to get a whole lot better, maybe just going to slowly regress. You want to slow down that regression as much as possible, which is why I think it was a really good idea to get Brandon Dorlus, to get Rook Ohorohoro. You have Kentavious Street, you have Taquan Graham, you have LaCale London. All these guys can be part of your rotation to some degree, which I think is going to help with the longevity of Grady Jarrett in particular. So very smart moves in that sense. So when you combine what they're going to be able to do against the run, the interior is really good. The edge just has to play very disciplined in that scenario. It's still the front four's ability to rush the passer that is going to be the red flag for this defense. And again, you're really hoping that Raheem Morris can get a hold of Arnold Ebiketie and Braylon Trice in particular and develop these guys much better than what we saw from a lot of the other edge players that Raheem Morris has worked with over the last 5 to 6 years. Now let's take a look at the most I don't know if bipolar is the right word, but I'm going to use it for this linebacker room. Because you look at this, and this is linebackers in coverage. They got the worst linebacker room in terms of that. They have Caden Ellis, who's sort of their linebacker one. He's their 3-down linebacker. JT Bertrand is a rookie. He's going to be competing for snaps with Troy Anderson and Nate Landman. But it's just not a good group against the pass. It's not a very reliable group, and they're going to really need to step up. They're going to need to scheme these guys. Maybe find like a dime linebacker type in their safety group to come in and play. It's just not a group that is very reliable when a quarterback is dropping back. Them picking up tight ends or them picking up running backs coming out of the backfield on like delay routes. Being particularly high-end athletes to chase down running backs going into the flats, setting up and being effective and having the field awareness and hook zones. It's just not an asset that this group is good at. But then they're the best linebacker group that I graded against the run. Nate Landman comes in, Caden Ellis really good at it. Even JT Bertrand, the rookie, he's a great number 3. He's like a high-end number 3 run defender. So this is where, like, right up the middle this year in particular, they're going to be a really good group when you combine that interior defensive line and this linebacker group. If they can play disciplined against the run with the edge room, this could prove to be one of the best run defenses in the entire league this year. And I don't think that's really out of the question. They just need discipline on the edge. And you got the third best interior run stuffing group and the best linebacker group. They can sit in a base 4-3, and you got 3 great linebackers. You can go into a base 3-4, and with Caden Ellis and Landman there in the middle, you could be playing Onyemata at nose tackle, Grady Jarrett, and then LaCale London. Who's running the ball in between the tackles there? I just don't see it. So this is a tremendous asset for this defense to have, and a great inheritance because these are guys that were on this team just last year. So you hope that you can improve in the defensive coaching and keep this group to where they should be, where I can project them to be. Let's move on now to the defensive backs, and we'll start with the cornerback room. They're tied for 16th. I still think they're just missing like that good number 2. AJ Terrell, he's had some really good years. I think at worst, he's like the 15th best corner in the league. Like around that, like at worst. How the rest of this group really performs, I think around him is going to determine his growth. And I think he's never really played with a great pass rush. So how that affects his game is also a factor here. And it's also sort of something that makes it hard to grade the overall cornerback room very highly because they sort of work hand in hand with that edge rush. Not a lot of great depth in particular. How they figure out who the top 3 guys are going to be. Antonio Hamilton came over. It's just I don't love everything outside of AJ Terrell. I like these guys as number 3s. It's sort of like the wide receiver room. If these were your number 3s, then fantastic. But the fact that these guys are going to get second string starter reps for cornerbacks as outside corners, I'm just not a fan of that idea. And I think that does inevitably drag down the entire group. Their support at the safety room, they're tied for 8th. By my estimation, the best safety in the league is Jesse Bates. I've been saying it for a couple of years now. His last year with the Bengals, it wasn't the greatest year, but he came in here to the Atlanta Falcons and absolutely blew people away. I felt really justified and redeemed in my assessment of him. The compliments that he has, Richie Grant is, he's really going to have to improve and get up to that level. Now, how the new system might suit him, I think, is something to watch. In their run support, third in the league. Jesse Bates, Hellman's fantastic 1-2 punch in run support. It's finding that number 2 safety for passing downs. That's going to be the task at hand. Is it Hellman's? You hope not, because Hellman's is not good. You're hoping that Richie Grant is the one that steps up, gets and starts playing into that like 70 grade range where he can be a really effective number 2, because you don't need him to be a number 1 like he's had to be in previous years up until really last year when Jesse Bates came in. So I really like the safety room. Jesse Bates really carries it. I think if Jesse Bates gets injured, this room might drop to like one of the worst. I think in safety coverage they would drop to the worst in the entire league, just because it would screw up the roles that everyone is playing. And I think that's another really important aspect to how well a defensive back room in particular plays, is that everyone has their role really carved out for them, which makes them better overall players from play to play. Where now if Jesse Bates is out, Richie Grant has to come in and play Jesse Bates' role. You're now the worst safety room in the league, because Richie Grant just can't do that. He's so significantly worse than Jesse Bates. Jesse Bates really does bring this group up and allows Hellman's and Grant and Crookshank, even like Antonio Hamilton there in the cornerback room, to really settle into the roles they're supposed to be playing that best suit their skill sets. So just taking a look at the depth here, you go to the cornerbacks against the run, they get a C grade, middle of the pack. They're not going to boost up your run defense, but they're also not going to drag it down. Just reliable. Again, the thing that stands out here, the edge room and the linebackers and pass coverage. Those are the weak points. Everything else, pretty solid across the board. So overall, this is the 13th graded defense, 24th against the pass, 2nd against the run. The pass defense is going to be inevitably what holds this defense back. It's inevitably, I think, what's going to lose people games, because on those, there's going to be weeks where that edge room and that front 4 pass rush is just non-existent. It's just the nature of the beast. They just don't have the talent as it stands right now. They're going to need to keep developing them. So that's going to make life very difficult on the back end for some of these better talents like AJ Terrell and Jesse Bates. And it's going to be what inevitably, I think, also costs them more games than I think people are expecting them to lose. So their overall rank is the 20th team in the league, 31st coaching staff, 4th offense, and 13th defense. The coaching staff, as the season goes on, as they settle in, as the scheme gets implemented properly onto these high-level talents that they have, this team's going to become very dangerous. But again, I think, the wide receiver room and the edge room, probably the cornerback room as well, they're still about a year away from making this team a contender, but they are right there. They're right there on the cusp of being that. So Atlanta Falcons fans, don't see this 20th rank and think I hate your team. I think you're just a year away, and I think that if you add a better wide receiver too, you boost the cornerback room up a little bit, and you get some development in that edge rushing room throughout the year. This time next year, this is probably going to be a top 10 graded team, as long as this coaching staff and the system develop as well as the season goes on and settle in and show the flashes that you need them to show, that aren't going to drag down the pure talent level that this roster has. And there you have it, the number 20 team in my 2024 NFL Deep Dive Series, the Atlanta Falcons. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, or at the very least stuck around. And if you did and you're here and you're watching me say this, just hit the thumbs up button and leave a comment in the comment section below. Subscribe if you haven't already. The series is on either side of my head right now, so you don't miss any of the other videos that I've posted, and you can watch it, in any order that you want. I don't know why you would. You should probably watch it from 32 all the way down. That's a lot of hours. It's a lot of videos, but it was a lot of work. And thank you for sticking around. It really rewards me, helps the algorithms. I'll see you guys next time.